to talk sequestration, you want to talk anything at all, I'm more than willing to say, see my public affairs officer. In all seriousness, a few things. I'll start off a little bit with what General Vi was talking about. The Army, and this is what I'm going to hit first. You all get the CPA sends, do you not? And those are the strategic key top-line messages that we send out every month. And what I want to, if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that, where I need your help, where the Army needs your help, is in telling that top-line message. Redstone Arsenal is phenomenally important. It is incredibly important. It's a national treasure. It's a treasure here for Alabama. Locally, it means a tremendous amount, but here's the challenge. I talked to CASAs about this today. And if you looked at the article that was in, the news coverage today about the CASA conference and the Alabama CASA, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army, was interviewed, we missed the top-line message. It was about Huntsville, Redstone Arsenal, and the impact. Phenomenal to the audience that you reach every day and have a great relationship with. It's Redstone, and that's fantastic, and it's Huntsville. But what about the rest of America? How does the rest of America, how are we communicating to the rest of America, and how are we integrating, nesting, or synchronizing our top-line messages in the Army, the challenges that the Army is going through, what the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Army want all of us to be able to communicate to all of the external audiences that are out there, while at the same time talking about your local or your regional or your agency or your organizational message. And so that's why we send out with with a lot of work that's done, those CPA sends. Because I'll tell you, sequestration, I would ask that every time your left foot hits the ground and you talk to somebody, whether it's community relations, whether it is the media or whomever that is out there, if you aren't talking about the challenges of budget and the fact that we need predictable and consistent spending in the United States Army, otherwise we're going to be at high risk in order to achieve our nation's interests on behalf of our nation. And why is that? It sounds like, how can that be? We have in about 150 countries, we have 140,000 soldiers that are deployed or forward stationed every single day. And we're talking about going from what was 570,000 just about 7 years ago. We've lost the British Army. We're down to 498,000. The British Army gone out of our formation. 498,000, and we're going down to 490. And if we get to 450 or 420, at 420, we're talking about high risk in order to be able to do two things. So first, we are supposed to defeat an adversary, in support of our war plans around the world in one theater, and be able to repel one and stop them from achieving objectives in another. And in order to do that, what do we have to do that? That's the force that is back here that we can surge forward, that is not already committed somewhere, in order to do that. So the challenge that we run into there is that as we go down, we have less and less capacity to do that. But that doesn't take into account what we're doing every single day out there in what we call phase 0, the building partner capacity, out there shaping and assuring allies and deterring adversaries. At 140,000, then it takes another 140,000 have to be ready to go out to do that. And so my point is that the current budget, the baseline budget that we have, is really based on the strategy. And the strategy is a phase 3 at-war strategy to defeat and really repel in two theaters. It doesn't talk about everything that's happening now. A year ago, we did not plan for ISIL. We didn't plan for Ebola in Africa. We didn't plan to go back into Iraq. We didn't plan for an earthquake in Nepal. We didn't plan for Russia to go into Crimea and for us to bolster our allies in Eastern Europe. All that was unplanned, unresourced. And my point to you is that the baseline budget that we are getting is not enough for us to sustain even the current level of readiness that we have as an Army, much less, as we look at the 3 pegs, which are people, modernization, and readiness, much less, very, very near and dear, I think, to your heart, is put the necessary funds to modernize the fleet and the force to be able to invest in future readiness. We don't have that right now because we are not achieving the consistent and on-time funding because of sequestration that is looming. And the way we're going to balance the budget is on the backs of people in the Army, because the Army, that is our greatest asset. It's where over 50 cents on every dollar goes to, is people. And so as you look at, much less so readiness, in order to maintain even the minimum level of readiness, and right now we can only achieve, as we look out based on the current level of funding and with sequestration, we will only be able to have ready, meaning ready to deploy within 30 days notice, 33% of our brigade combat teams instead of 70%. And if we reduce the capacity of the Army, the number of BCTs, then guess what that means? It means we're more reliant on less forces to be ready to surge forward to deploy if something happens, much less the current contingencies that are going on every single day. And so my message to you is that sequestration is evil. It is evil. And I ask you as public affairs professionals to help through your commands and your commanders and your agency leaders and heads to tell that story and then talk about the impact on your organization, Redstone, Huntsville, the economy, everything else. So, you know, the top line message I would ask you to take away, along with that, is everything that we're doing out there in the Army. You know, if you look at the CPA sends this month, you'll see how the Army is the backbone of the Joint Force out of all in all the geographic combatant commands. We provide the preponderance of the day-to-day forces out there that shape, build partner capacity, do exercises, partner with other armies to build them up, assure our allies, ensure basing and overrights, and everything that we need in order to be able to keep things just the way they are so that we don't have to do those O plans, those war plans when things might break. That is lost, I think, on the American people as well. And while it's extremely important that we tell this story to an internal audience and also to the local audience because they need to know, it's also important that we try and reach out beyond our comfort zone. And this is my challenge. This is what I have to do over the next year and a half, 2 years. I have to figure out how to take the community relations piece that you have, synchronize that with our strategic communications message, and get it into those markets where we are not, and talk to the American people. Get it into, make sure that Congress understands through legislative liaison, work with the CASAs and community leaders and business folks that understand and we can talk to and in very understandable terms. Sequestration is not an easy term to understand. What it means is we don't have enough money to stay ready to fight our wars, much less fight future wars that we think might happen. The velocity of instability in the world is doing nothing but getting worse. And I'll tell you, the velocity of, the velocity of, I would say, fragility within the Army is equally becoming a concern. And so, although it is extremely important, the local piece that you have, what I want to do from Big Army is kind of just ask you to help us tell the story, that story to other organizations and get that little talking point or that little piece of an elevator speech inside of your commanders or your organizational leaders' heads and put it on their pocket so they say, hey, here it is and here's the impact. And I call it kind of a death by 1,000 cuts because what happens? Congress, they have an 11% approval rating, but each congressperson, each congressman or woman, 96% re-election rate. Why? Because I love my congressperson, I love my congressman, but I hate Congress. But eventually what's going to happen, and I would tell you to think about it in this way, Redstone, Huntsville. They're going to fight for everything they can fight for their district and their stakeholders and their economy here, and I don't blame them, and I'm all for that 100%. But the challenge is when you say, that's okay, but take it from him, and take it from her, and take it from there, is that what ends up happening is eventually, you saw what happened in the listening sessions, right? Everyone's afraid, and everyone's going to take little pieces and bites over time. And so it's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts individually, and then until at such point, at what time do we say we need to band collectively together and say enough is enough? You've taken some away from me and some away from them, and you're going to keep coming back to the well collectively, and it's death by 1,000 cuts on Redstone. You don't want that. So we have to partner with other districts, other installations, other states, so we can get a collective message, which is why that top-line message is so important. So that's what we're trying to do in the United States Army. It's not dire, but I will tell you that if sequestration does not get fixed and if we can't get consistent on-time funding, I mean, try and run an organization where you get 50% of your funding. You can't do a 5-year plan. You can't plan for the future. General Vi, I think, talked about the importance of modernization, the importance of equipment, and it's a lot of what is done here. I mean, a lot of your organizations run on that. So I would kind of implore you from that standpoint. Switching over to public affairs. I'm in it for 5 weeks, so I'm no pro at all. I'm very much willing and want to take ideas and get to understand the public affairs profession, whether that would be the SRC 45, the military folks, and the public affairs, the 46 and the SRC, but also the CP 22 side, the civilian side. For me, professional development, training, leader development, broadening, understanding, what a career map looks like is a very, very important thing. I've charged Bobby Golford and her team to kind of help map that out for me. We have predominantly, I think, Department of the Army or at least DoD or interagency civilians that are here in the room. So for me, there's a few things that we do. We're going to do monthly webinars. If you're not familiar with the monthly webinar, there's going to be one. I think it's next week, if I'm not mistaken. I'll be taking it, or the week after next. There is a closed Facebook page, if you're not aware, that is for just you CP22 professionals. If you're not aware of that, go into that. I'm trying to understand what the demand is for needs to be able to broaden and professional development and find talent management type of, or broadened type of assignments, or should I say exposures or experiences that we can get not just for military but for civilians. So I am really trying to look at that and understand it and see what we can do within the fiscal sequestration umbrella to be able to get after that on behalf of the CP22s, our Department of the Army civilians. And so I'm really charging her with that as well, taking very, very seriously the professional development, looking at the position descriptions, understanding what it is you're supposed to do, making sure that we're doing our counseling on time and doing it right so that we can professionally develop not just the military force, but the civilian workforce. So I'm into the ACTEDs. I'm reading it. I'm getting to understand it. The CP22, the book on what it is that CP22s do and what your career map is supposed to look like. And I'm diving deep into that. Give me a little bit of time so I can better understand.